From the edge of a dying star they came, beautiful, deadly, and feared across the galaxy. Known only as the Ravagers, these alien women had no need for mercy or reason. Towering in height and wrapped in armor that shimmered like molten silver, they moved like living shadows. Planets fell silent when they arrived. Empires crumbled. Their eyes glowed with a hunger that couldn't be satisfied by food or conquest alone. They fed on fear, life force, and the energy of entire civilizations. Where they went, nothing grew again. Their ships, dark and quiet like midnight storms, appeared without warning in the skies of peaceful worlds. What followed was always the same: a wave of panic, a rain of fire, and then silence. Some believed they were a punishment sent by the universe itself. Others whispered that they were once queens of a fallen star kingdom, turned mad by loneliness and war. But no one truly knew. The only thing everyone agreed on was this: there was no stopping them. When Earth's telescopes first picked up the approaching fleet, governments panicked. Cities locked down. Military forces launched everything they had into the sky. But deep down, everyone knew it was useless. The Ravagers had destroyed far more advanced worlds with a flick of their claws. News spread fast. People ran. Satellites went dark. Cities emptied. Yet in the northern forests of Montana, far away from the cities, one man watched the chaos unfold not with fear, but with a strange kind of calm. His name was Eli Hunter. He had no medals, no weapons, no grand destiny. He lived in a quiet wooden cabin surrounded by trees, where the wind whispered secrets, and the stars felt close enough to touch. While the world panicked and screamed, Eli sat on his porch, sipping black coffee and flipping through the pages of a dusty old book about ancient alien myths. The sky above him flashed with strange colors as the alien ships entered the atmosphere. Trees shook. Animals fled. A ship landed not far from his home with a thundering quake that shook the earth, and the forest lit up in a strange violet glow. Birds flew in all directions. Somewhere in the distance, a siren howled. But Eli simply looked up from his book, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Huh." And then, casually, as if greeting a neighbor, he stood up, stretched, and said, "Well, looks like company's here." Far from fear, his voice carried a quiet curiosity. That night, as one of the Ravagers stepped through the trees in silence, drawn by something she didn't understand, her glowing eyes met Eli's calm gaze. And for the first time in her long, violent life, she didn't attack. Something had begun, something that no weapon or army had ever achieved. A moment of pause in the storm, and it all started with a man who refused to run. Eli Hunter was not the kind of man stories were usually written about. He didn't wear a uniform, didn't carry a weapon, and had never been inside a spaceship. His life was simple: mornings with coffee, afternoons spent chopping firewood, and quiet evenings with books that smelled like forgotten time. The forest around his cabin was thick with pine and silence, a place untouched by the panic sweeping the rest of Earth. When the Ravagers landed near his home, the world far beyond his trees had already fallen into chaos. Cities locked their doors, governments vanished behind closed bunkers, and people ran from shadows in the sky. But Eli remained where he was, calm as the mountains surrounding him. He had seen the flashes in the sky, heard the distant thunder of the alien ships landing, but he had not flinched. He had simply placed another log on the fire, popped a bag of popcorn, and returned to his chair on the porch. That night, the air was thick with electric hums, the kind that made the hair on one's arms rise. The animals had disappeared. The trees seemed to hold their breath. Then, through the dark woods, something moved. Silent, tall, watching. A figure stepped out from the shadows, and the world seemed to pause. She stood at least 8 feet tall, armored in something that shimmered between bone and starlight. Her skin had a deep silver hue, and her hair flowed behind her like smoke underwater. Eyes like twin suns stared at the man sitting so casually on the porch. She was a ravager, a being feared across the stars, a destroyer of worlds, a queen of hunger. Her clawed feet made no sound as they touched the earth. Every part of her radiated danger. She had ended civilizations with a glance. And yet, the man before her did not scream, did not run, did not even reach for anything to defend himself. Instead, he leaned forward, tilted his head slightly, and with the same tone one might offer a neighbor, said, "Hey there, want some popcorn?" The ravager blinked. Her claws tightened slightly, expecting a trick. But there was no fear in the man's face, no hatred in his voice. Only curiosity. Her head tilted. This was not how it was supposed to go. Usually there were screams, weapons, resistance, or surrender. But this was something else. She stepped closer, drawn by something unfamiliar. The smell of burnt butter, the warmth of firelight, the stillness of a man who did not fear her. She sat, not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand. Who was this strange human, and why didn't he tremble? Why did he offer her food instead of fear? That night, no cities burned, no lives ended. Instead, in the middle of a dark forest on a terrified planet, a ravager queen and a quiet man sat side by side, one holding a bowl of popcorn, the other holding questions the stars had never heard before. Her name was Zalara, a name that echoed like thunder across dying galaxies. She was not just another ravager, she was their queen, their fiercest warrior, their chosen leader. In her lifetime, she had crushed the last defenses of 43 planets. She had watched entire species vanish beneath her gaze, and her name alone made battle fleets flee without firing a shot. But on this quiet, green world, something had changed. For the first time, she sat not on a throne of bone or steel, but on an old wooden chair beside a fire, across from a man whose calm unsettled her more than any weapon ever had. His cabin smelled of pine and something sweet, warm, strange, welcoming. He handed her a small white puff he called popcorn, and with cautious curiosity, she took a bite. The taste was unlike anything she had consumed before, not just in flavor, but in feeling. There was no fear in it, no stolen energy, no panic to feast upon, just warmth and salt and something almost innocent. She looked at the man, her sharp gaze narrowing. "What is this?" she asked, her voice like smoke wrapped in metal. "Delicious," he answered with a small smile, "and human." The word held no pride, no threat, just a simple truth spoken without fear. That single moment lingered in the air longer than most wars lasted. Zalara studied him with the precision of a huntress, expecting mockery, weakness, or hidden traps. But there was nothing of the sort. His body language spoke of peace, not submission. He was not trying to impress or survive. He was simply present, calm, unshaken. Something unfamiliar stirred within her, something she had never known even during her rise to power among the stars, curiosity without hunger. "Why don't you fear me?" she asked, the words slipping out before she realized it. He tilted his head slightly, as if thinking carefully. "You're interesting. You're strong. You're also just someone I'm having a conversation with." There was no tremble in his voice, no wide-eyed desperation. His words carried weight not because they were loud, but because they were real. She could have ended him with a single movement. But she didn't. Something deeper, far stranger, rooted her in place. The trees stood tall and silent around them. The sky flickered with distant alien lights. And yet this small patch of earth felt untouched by fear. She remained there longer than she intended, saying little, thinking much. When she finally rose and walked back into the shadows, her mind was filled not with strategies of destruction or conquest to come, but with questions. Who was this man? Why had he seen her not as a monster, but as a person? And why did she feel different now? That night, she returned to her ship in silence, but something had already shifted. Something inside her had cracked open. A new thought, fragile but powerful, had taken root. Perhaps not all humans were weak. Perhaps one of them was something more. The days that followed were unlike anything the Ravagers had ever known. Zalara returned each evening, slipping silently through the trees to find the same man seated on his porch, as steady as the mountains behind him. Eli Hunter welcomed her, without surprise, as if he had known she would return. Their conversations were quiet, often beginning with simple things, questions about trees, the stars, the way fire crackled in the cold night. Though she spoke little at first, Zalara listened. She watched the way he moved, slow and thoughtful, never once acting as though she were a threat. No one had ever treated her that way before. On distant planets, even the bravest warriors had fallen to their knees at the sight of her. Her power had always spoken louder than words, but here, it was silence that spoke the most. She noticed strange things in his world, flowers that bloomed without fear, birds that sang at dawn, the way the sunlight filtered through the branches like golden mist. In her world, life was fire and conquest. Here, it was calm and full of meaning she could not explain. One afternoon, Eli handed her a cup of tea, warm and fragrant with herbs from his garden. She held it awkwardly, her armored fingers not built for such delicate things, but she accepted it. As the steam rose into the cool air, something inside her softened. "I do not understand you," she finally admitted. "Every world falls before me, but not this one, not you." Eli looked out at the trees, then back at her. "Maybe that's the point," he said gently. "Maybe some things aren't meant to fall." The words struck her harder than any weapon ever had. That night, when she returned to her ship, her warriors noticed a change. Her armor remained the same, her eyes still burned with the same fire, but her silence was different. There was no command, no plan of attack, only thought. In the heart of the Ravager fleet, generals gathered, confused. Their queen no longer pushed them forward. She no longer demanded destruction. Whispers spread like smoke. Some feared she had gone soft. Others believed she was waiting for something greater. Only one of them dared ask her directly. "What holds you back, my queen?" the general asked. Zalara stared out the viewport at the blue planet below. Her voice was steady, quiet. "There is a man," she said. "A man who does not fear me. A man who offers tea instead of blood." The general blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. But she said no more. Deep inside her, something had changed. Power alone no longer felt complete. Fear no longer felt satisfying. There was something else, something unfamiliar but strong, that drew her back to that porch in the forest. It was not weakness. It was not confusion. It was the beginning of something new. Something the galaxy had never prepared her for. Something far more dangerous than war. Connection. Word of the Queen's silence rippled through the Ravager fleet like a storm with no thunder. Armored warriors, bred for destruction and hardened by centuries of conquest, waited for her signal to strike. Yet no command came. Day after day passed, and still the Queen returned to the same forest clearing, drawn not by strategy, but by a quiet pull she could not name. There, beneath the whispering pines and a sky brushed with gold, Eli Hunter continued his simple life. He did not ask her to change, did not question her past, did not press her for reasons. Instead, he shared his world piece by piece, an old vinyl record that played haunting blues from a crackling speaker, a sketch of a bird he had seen by the stream, a carved wooden owl he had shaped with careful hands. And every time she sat beside him, the chaos within her grew quieter. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, painting the sky in warm fire, she spoke without thinking. "I was made to destroy," she said, her voice low and strange. "It is all I have ever known." Eli stirred the stew in the pot hanging over the fire and looked up. "Maybe you were," he answered softly. "But that doesn't mean it's all you are." The words hit her like an unseen strike, not painful, but deep. She had never been given the choice to be anything else. Her entire life had been forged in battle, shaped by screams, sharpened by survival. Yet here, no one demanded she prove herself. Here, the only thing that mattered was who she chose to be in that moment. The trees made no judgment. The fire offered its warmth to all. And Eli, with his quiet eyes and steady hands, saw her not as a queen of war, but simply as someone sitting beside him. That night, when she returned to her ship, she stood before her warriors. Their armor gleamed, their eyes burned with purpose, but their faces were lined with confusion. She looked at them for a long time, remembering all the worlds they had taken, all the stars they had silenced. "There will be no attack," she said firmly. Gasps followed like echoes. "But the humans are weak," one soldier protested. "They are not," she replied. "One of them is stronger than any of us." Her words carried weight that no one could argue. She turned from them then, not out of shame, but with certainty. Her path had changed, no longer driven by hunger, no longer chasing conquest. For the first time, her footsteps moved toward something that felt like peace. Back in the forest, Eli sat waiting, unaware of the firestorm he had just quieted with kindness alone. He didn't need to know. He simply poured another cup of tea, knowing in his bones that she would return. And she did. Less a queen of fear, now and more a woman beginning to understand the strange, powerful beauty of choice. That evening, a storm rolled in from the distant mountains, dark and brooding, casting streaks of lightning across the sky. Rain poured over the forest like a curtain of silver threads. Yet inside the small wooden cabin, warmth still held strong. Zalara remained seated beside the fire, her once shimmering armor dampened and streaked with mud. For the first time in her long existence, her shoulders appeared less burdened by duty and more shaped by thought. Eli placed another log onto the flames and then returned to his seat across from her. The silence between them had shifted. It was no longer filled with caution or curiosity, but comfort. Outside, thunder cracked the heavens, but inside, their world was calm. She began to speak, slowly, as if testing the weight of words never spoken aloud. She spoke of her youth on the war moons, where her first lessons were not in language or art, but in pain and dominance. She remembered her mother, a general who taught her how to end lives before she learned what it meant to save one. She described her rise through the Ravager ranks, the battles won, the enemies crushed, the glory gained through rivers of blood. Each word painted the portrait of a woman forged in a world where love was weakness and mercy was treason. Eli listened without judgment, his expression unreadable, his silence gentle and unshaking. When she paused, unsure of how to continue, he leaned forward slightly and asked, "And when did you first feel tired?" The question stopped her heart for a moment. No one had ever asked that. Not even she had dared to. Tired? It was not a word permitted in her world. And yet, the answer came easily. "After I burned the sky fields of Drova," she whispered. The victory meant nothing. Only silence followed. A silence that felt wrong. That silence had grown over time, widening into a void she could never name, until now. Eli didn't offer pity, nor did he claim to understand. He simply nodded, as though accepting a truth too old to challenge. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, something more powerful than thunder cracked open between them. Not romance, not alliance, but understanding. Mutual, fragile, and strong. Later, as the storm faded into distant echoes, she stood near the window, watching the last drops fall from the leaves. Her gaze lifted toward the stars, once symbols of conquest, now distant lights she saw differently. Behind her, Eli spoke softly. "You don't have to be what they made you." The words hung in the air like a fragile offering. She turned, her face unreadable, her eyes no longer blazing, but deep and searching. In that moment, something final and quiet settled inside her. A decision. A beginning. She no longer belonged to the war. And for the first time, she didn't feel lost without it. She felt found. Not by a planet, not by a people, but by a single truth shared in the rain. The sun rose gently over the forest, its light spilling through the trees like gold dust on the damp earth. Birds sang softly, and mist curled upward from the grass, fading as the morning warmed the land. The cabin stood still and quiet, its windows glowing faintly from the fire that still crackled within. Inside, Zalara stood beside the hearth, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. Her armor, once the symbol of terror across star systems, now rested on a nearby chair, cleaned, polished, but untouched. For the first time since her youth, her body felt light, not from the absence of weight, but from the release of something far heavier. Expectation. Behind her, Eli moved through his morning routine, preparing tea, checking the fire, humming an old tune under his breath. No grand speeches were exchanged, no declarations were made, and yet, the silence between them now held more meaning than any battle cry ever had. As she stepped outside, the forest greeted her like an old friend. Each leaf shimmered with dew, each breeze felt like a secret whispered just for her. The stars had always belonged to her past, to war and conquest. But the earth beneath her, feet, that was new, that was present. When she turned back, Eli stood at the doorway watching her. In his eyes, there was no question of what came next. There was only trust. Later that day, a sleek Ravager scout ship descended quietly just beyond the forest, stirring the wind and disturbing the stillness. Her second-in-command stepped out, his armor gleaming, his eyes searching for orders. "The fleet awaits," he said, bowing low. "What is your command, my queen?" She looked at him for a long moment, her mind calm, her voice steady. "Stand down. Disband the war council. End the conquest." The warrior froze, stunned. "But our purpose," she raised a hand, "is over." There was no fury in her voice, no demand, only truth. The warrior hesitated, then bowed again, deeper this time. He understood. Or at least, he respected that she did. The scout ship lifted and vanished into the clouds, leaving behind only the wind and the trees. By nightfall, Zalara returned to the cabin once more. She found Eli sitting on the porch, watching the stars. Without a word, she joined him. They sat together, their shoulders close but not touching, the silence between them peaceful. Far above, the stars no longer seemed like battlegrounds. They were simply lights in the sky, beautiful, distant, and quiet. The galaxy would write songs about her power, tell stories of the queen who could conquer any world. But none of them would know the truth. That the fiercest heart in the galaxy was not broken by war, nor softened by defeat, but transformed by the quiet, fearless kindness of one human. And under that sky, with no crown on her head and no war behind her, she smiled for the first time without guilt. For she was no longer feared. She was finally free.